second of our student support group meetings that is hosted by CERI and featuring Lewin Moodley, who has kindly volunteered her services here with us today. Lewin Moodley is a learning and development manager at PPS Investments. She has over a decade's worth of experience in the financial sector. She is a qualified business coach, facilitator, I'm getting there, program designer, skills developer. That was meant to be a statement, not a question. I should know Lewin very well. She joined us a couple of months ago for a very exciting session on emotional intelligence. And today she'll be extending her kindness by volunteering a discussion about accountability. And this is something that we find so important within our setting, not only the financial sector, but within academia as well. You know, this concept of, you're a postgraduate, you have a project to manage, and it's largely independent, and trying to make sure that you do meet all your deliverables, your goals. You want to graduate, you want to do it with the least amount of headache as possible, right? And this concept of accountability is something that will probably help you to meet those goals with the least amount of headache possible. At least that's my understanding of it, and Lewin is going to tell us so much more about it. I would like to take this opportunity within this room and also online, just to give us a sense of who is sharing this space with us. This is meant to be a postgraduate community. We want to help each other. We want to know who we are, right? We all want to grow together. So I'm going to host a little icebreaker. Don't walk away from your computers if you're online. People in the room can't walk away, so it's a little unfair if you do. Within the room, I would like you to look at the person to your left-hand side, and then, of course, the person to your right-hand side. Yes, I see people showing their hands like, what's my left-hand side? Please introduce yourself. My name is Lenine Liebenberg. I am based at Stellenbosch University at CERI. I study a lot of stuff on sexual reproductive health for me right now. And very importantly, please do let us know what your spirit animal is. What's a spirit animal? It is something real or fictitious, I don't know, up to you, that embodies your essence, right? Something that will walk into a room and someone will say, that's definitely Lenin's spirit animal. So for me, I'm not embarrassed at all about this, actually. I would say I would be a giraffe. My spirit animal is a giraffe. Stop laughing at me. My head's in the clouds. I like to look around, see what other people are doing, maybe look down a little bit. But not get involved. That's largely who I am. I see some nods in the room. Yeah, that sounds like you. Maybe a little bit louder than a giraffe, but still, that's my spirit animal. So for the people in the room, I'm just going to give one person 2 minutes, the other person 2 minutes, and let's make it 1 minute so it's nice and quick. And the people online, please do use your chat box. Who you are, where you're based, what you do. And don't forget that spirit animal. We're going to go through it, right? I also want to know who I'm speaking to online and in the room. Okay, your 2 minutes starts now. You want to introduce yourself. What's spirit animal before we get going? Come on, people in the chat box. We've got a pussycat there. That's wonderful. Please do engage. I'm loving the energy in the room. You have 30 more seconds to think about your spirit animals and do an introduction here. Thank you very much. That was 2 minutes worth of very deep discussion about spirit animals and what embodies you, right? Could I have a couple of throwing out some spirit animals so that I could also have an aha moment over here? I see online we have a couple of pussycats. Some like to take naps. Others, yes, I guess naps are common. Sweet and playful. That would be too Leo, by the way. Anybody else?
I would say I'm a cheater.
We have a cheetah in the room, everybody. I'm very curious.
I mean, it's difficult to choose, but I mean, if I, off the top of my head, I would choose a cheetah because I'm always chasing something.
And
Always.
it. Okay. Thank you for participating in this little exercise. I think it's very important for us to get to know each other as a postgraduate
Absolutely.
community. Students, staff, we're here to help each other meet our goals, right? Mostly academic goals, mostly career goals. And it's nice to be able to do that if you can speak and interact with each other. So if you've forgotten names, you now know a spirit animal walking around here that you can connect with, okay? Online as well. And with no further ado, let me introduce Lewin Moodley, who will now be in the session. Thank you very much, Lewin, and thank you for your time, and we look forward to the photo.
Excellent, thank you. Do I stand here? I'm very worried about the visuals. I'm not used to doing a hybrid. I generally in person or online. And there's a lot of things happening here. So I think if you can maybe just help me with the chat. If there are any questions, that would be great. But anyway, as Lenin mentioned, I am Lewin Moodley. I'll be chatting about accountability today. I am the Learning and Development Manager at PPS Investments. You may be wondering, why am I here? Why do I find myself here? Yes. So the whole purpose of our organization is to empower graduate professionals live the lives they want to live in a world worth living in. It really is, that is our purpose. So any which way that we can support students on their journey to becoming a graduate professional, that's where we jump in. Whether it's for bursaries, whether it's for skills workshops, vacation work, we're there to help, because at the end of the day, our clients are only graduate professionals. So we need to ensure that we can support. Make sense? Awesome. Okay, great. So today I'm speaking about accountability. I have spoken about emotional intelligence before. This is our new topic, another one that's also very important and something that you should also keep in your back pocket on your journey through this ever so bumpy life that we go through. So I'm going to try as far as possible to make this comfortable for both face-to-face learners and for the learners online. Great. So for the learners online, on the chat box, I actually just skipped that. So sorry. For everyone, so online, if you can go to this Mentimeter, what comes to mind when thinking about accountability? I'm unsure if you guys also have your cell phones here and if you can also access the Mentimeter.
This is an anonymous.
Yes, it is anonymous. So essentially, it's just when you hear the word accountability, what do you think about? What comes to mind? Yeah. You can paint a picture of somebody saying you are accountable for this project. What comes to mind? I assume you don't have a cell phone here. No. Oh, gosh. Sorry. Yes. Can you just test if it's live? Because it could be. There we go. We can see some responses coming through. We have ownership, and I'm assuming leadership, responsibility, discipline, management, flexible goal setting, responsibilities, keen. That's interesting. Boundary setting, diligent. Boundary setting sounds like a nice conversation that we can unpack maybe later in the session. Okay, so I pretty much jumped to this slide first. I'm going to go back to the sort of definition, the actual definition of accountability. And then we can come back to this. So accountability is the acceptance and obligation to carry out a responsibility. In short, the fact or condition of being accountable, i.e. responsibility. So for the most part, and even if we look at these here, sometimes there can be a negative connotation or feeling towards accountability when there's actually so much power in accountability. And hopefully during the session, I can change the way you see it, and you can see it as something that's empowering you, something that you have control over, rather than something that has a dark cloud when you are accountable. Okay, so I'm going to kick off by jumping into some scenarios of what accountability is in practice. Okay, so I'm going to play the scenario. I'm going to give you 3 options to choose from in terms of what you think is the most accountable response given the scenario I'm going to play. And then for people online, you can, of course, capture your response in the chat. Right, so this is the scenario. You receive a telephone call from your cell phone provider stating that your monthly repayment was not received. The cell phone provider is adding a late fee and requesting their payment. You are very surprised since the repayment is an automatic deduction which is debited from your bank account. You contact your bank and discover that they had a software problem and your account was debited in error. They fixed the problem already. So essentially there was an issue with your bank. Your cell phone provider tried to do the deduction, it didn't work, and for that reason there's now a late fee. So you're going to choose one of the 3 options in terms of what's the most accountable. Option number 1, transfer the payment to the cell phone provider, explain what had happened, pay the late fee, and request your bank to reimburse the fee. That's option 1. Option 2, pay the monthly repayment and write a letter asking the cell phone company to reverse the late fee and explain what had happened because it actually wasn't your fault. Option number 3, contact your bank and inform them of the issue and request them to pay the late fee. So those are your 3 options. I want you to think about if you were in the situation right now, which option would you actually choose? So for the people online, you may vote. For the people in the room, I'm going to ask you, for all the people that chose option 1, raise your hand. For the people who chose option 2, raise your hand, and 3, and so on. So you can think about it. Does everybody understand the scenario? Yes. Okay, now that the responses are going online, I'm just going to check with these learners. For everyone who chooses or chose option 1, raise your hand. So you're going to have to make one option, eh? Here we have one over there. Anyone choose option 2? Okay. And option 3. Okay, great. Just to understand it, maybe this is why you were afraid to lift your hand. But if you could tell me why you chose option 1 over there. Yes, sorry, I don't know what your name is. No, behind you. Yes, you were the only one that chose option 1. Yes. So what you're saying is it's not the cell phone company's fault. So do the right thing and give them what they are owed. Okay. And I think you chose option 2. Can you tell me why you chose that one? Okay, so what you're saying is if you go ahead and pay the late fee, as in option 1, there's a chance that you will not get that reimbursed or refunded. Okay. So it's safer to just, okay. Option 3, there's some people here that chose option 3. Anybody one of the two guys over there, option 3? And just to hear your thoughts. Interesting. Thank you for that. So it wasn't that bad, eh? It's okay. Okay, so the most accountable response is option 1, and I'm going to explain why. So first, I want you to see or view accountability as having control over the scenario, over the situation. So coming back to the story, you have an agreement with both a cell phone company and an agreement with your bank. These are two separate agreements, right? With the cell phone company, surely in your contract you said by this and this date, I will ensure the repayment is made to you. That's for the cell phone company. But they've made it easier to make that deduction. But you are still responsible to ensure the payment is made to them, right? With the bank, of course, they had an error. What you need to do here is to ensure that the cell phone company gets what is due to them, which is that late fee. It was your fault in error from the contractual point of view or from the agreement that you initially had. That payment was not received and that was your obligation, right? There's no contract with the bank in the contract with your cell phone company. So they don't want to hear any story about the bank. It's you and the cell phone company. So that is step 1. The minute you pay the late fee, that is resolved. You have control over that. Now you can then contact the bank and ensure that they reimburse you for that late fee. You can now hold them accountable for their error. If you chose any other option, there is a possibility that it would not be resolved immediately. For example, if you chose not to pay the late fee because it may not be refunded or whatever the case may be, so you contact the bank and say, bank, you need to deal with this. It's not your fault, not your problem. There's a possibility that the bank may not interact with your cell phone company in time. That late fee may increase to 2 months, 3 months, 4 months until it's over 1,000 rand that you need to pay, and you would be liable. So the best solution to solve the problem with the most control is option number 1. Does that make sense? I need you to view accountability as having control to your solution. I am going to speak a little bit more about that later. No questions? People like to debate this. Yes. The thing is, there is a concern that the bank may not reimburse the late fee, right? So you're not going to get your money back. But the alternative is to have the late fee increased and increased and increased each month because they're not being repaid. Do you understand? So you have to solve this problem first. So it's done. It cannot continue. And now you're moving on to hold the other party accountable. Oh, are you saying that if you choose an alternative option and not paying the late fee, are you lacking? No, that's fine. Because you stuck to your obligation. If you choose not to hold the bank accountable, that's on you. That's fine. You're just not getting your money reimbursed. But if we go to other scenarios, it may require you to hold somebody else accountable. And I'm going to give you some questions you can ask yourself to evaluate if it's necessary for you to hold somebody else accountable. Yes, sir. Sorry, I can't hear you. The cell phone company gave an option of a debit order. Yes, they gave the option. They said, we'll make it easy for you. We will deduct it. But the bank had an issue. So because the bank had an issue, they couldn't deduct that fee. Do you like the actions? Excuse me? But there's no contract between the bank and the cell phone provider. There's a contract with yourself and the cell phone provider and yourself and the bank. They are not interacting with each other. They have no agreements. There's nothing there. We can debate after the session. But do you understand? Does it make sense? What I want you to take away is how much control you have to finding a solution. Okay. I want to play a clip for you. Hopefully you can hear the sound. This is joined the wrong way. Okay. It's gonna be.
How many of you are blamers? How many of you, when something goes wrong, the first thing you want to know is whose fault it is? Hi, my name is Brene. I am a blamer. Let me just tell you this quick story. So this was a couple of years ago when I first realized the magnitude to which I blame. I'm in my house, I have on white slacks and a pink sweater set, and I'm drinking a cup of coffee in my kitchen. It's a full cup of coffee. I drop it on the tile floor. It goes into a million pieces, splashes up all over me. And the first, a millisecond after it hit the floor, right out of my mouth is this: damn you, Steve. Who is my husband? Because let me tell you how fast this works for me. So Steve plays water polo with a group of friends. And the night before, he went to go play water polo. And I said, hey, make sure you come back at 10, because I can never fall asleep until you're home. And he got back like at 10:30. And so I went to bed a little bit later than I thought, ergo, my second cup of coffee that I probably would not be having had he come home when we discussed. Therefore,
Should I play it from the beginning? Yeah.
And so the rest of that story is I'm cleaning up the kitchen. Steve calls, caller ID. I'm like, hey.
Online,
He's like,
can you
hey, what's
hear?
going on, babe? What's going on? So I'll tell you exactly what's going on. I'm cleaning up the coffee that spilled all, dude, like dial tone. Because he knows.
I'm just going to
How many of you?
the beginning.
How many of you are blamers? How many of you, when something goes wrong, the first thing you want to know is whose fault it is? Hi, my name is Brene. I am a blamer. Let me just tell you this quick story. So this is a couple years ago when I first realized the magnitude to which I blame. I'm in my house. I have on white slacks and a pink sweater set, and I'm drinking a cup of coffee in my kitchen. It's a full cup of coffee. I drop it on the tile floor. It goes into a million pieces, splashes up all over me. And the first, a millisecond after it hit the floor, right out of my mouth is this: damn you, Steve. Who is my husband? Because let me tell you how fast this works for me. So Steve plays water polo with a group of friends. And the night before, he went to go play water polo. And I said, hey, make sure you come back at 10, because I can never fall asleep until you're home. And he got back like at 10:30. And so I went to bed a little bit later than I thought. Ergo, my second cup of coffee that I probably would not be having had he come home when we discussed. Therefore, and so the rest of that story is I'm cleaning up the kitchen. Steve calls, caller ID. I'm like, hey. He's like, hey, what's going on, babe? What's going on? So I'll tell you exactly what's going on. I'm cleaning up the coffee that spilled all, dude, like dial tone. Because he knows. How many of you go to that place when something bad happens, the first thing you want to know is whose fault is it? I'd rather it be my fault than no one's fault. Because why? Why? Because it gives us some semblance of control. But here, if you enjoy blaming, this is where you should stick your fingers in your ear and do the na thing, because I'm getting ready to ruin it for you. Because here's what we know from the research. Blame is simply the discharging of discomfort and pain. It has an inverse relationship with accountability. Accountability, by definition, is a vulnerable process. It means me calling you and saying, hey, my feelings were really hurt about this, and talking. It's not blaming. Blaming is simply a way that we discharge anger. People who blame a lot seldom have the tenacity and grit to actually hold people accountable, because we expend all of our energy raging for 15 seconds and figuring out whose fault something is. And blaming is very corrosive in relationships, and it's one of the reasons we miss our opportunities for empathy. Because when something happens and we're hearing a story, we're not really listening. We're in the place where I was, making the connections as quickly as we can about whose fault something was.
I'm sure we could all relate to that. On different sides of the screen. Okay, yeah, so I'm sure we could all identify with that scenario. There's an echo again, eh? We tend to very quickly make the calculations in our head when something's happened to ensure that it's not our fault. And those calculations happen so quickly to anyone other than you. We're pointing outward. And what we're doing there is that we're missing the opportunity to have a solution or have control over the situation. Because the minute you're pointing outward, you're losing the power to solve it. What do I mean? So for a moment, I want to pretend that we are in Blamers Anonymous. I'm going to give you a scenario about myself, something that I learned, funny enough, while I was designing this workshop. And then hopefully if somebody else has another story that either they're currently in and they need advice, or a scenario from the past that they would like to speak about, go for it, because this is how we learn and how we get other people's perspectives of how you could solve that scenario. Don't feel under pressure. It's nice if you do. If you don't, it's also okay. And the same for the people online. Feel free to use the chat. So obviously I've been doing learning and development for a very long time. And I read all of you. I can see on your faces if I'm getting through to you or if I'm not getting through to you. Sometimes I do make mistakes because when people think they have this puzzle look on their face, and then sometimes I worry that you're absolutely confused. But in any event, I can see when I'm winning and I can see when I'm losing. I can see where I'm not doing well and I'm not reaching that mark, right? And I remember one day I totally missed the mark. I could see on the faces, people were bored, absolutely bored. And it's not fun. It's not fun as a facilitator to see the bored faces, because then you feel like you failed. And on the way home, I thought about it and I said, people, they're just so overworked and they're underpaid. They don't have time for this. Nobody has time for training, right? Agree with me? I was blaming my learners for my session being boring. That's how quick it happens. And the minute I blamed the learners or the audience, I was missing the opportunity to do something about it, to change it. Because if I looked inward and say, you know what, Lewin, there's definitely something you can do. This is not what you usually do. It's generally engaging. What was different, right? Think about it. And I could throw around ideas. Maybe I shouldn't do it on a Monday, have a session on a Monday. Because everybody, they have the weekend and then Monday is super busy. They're distracted. They don't have time for a training session now. I can't do it at 5 o'clock or 4 o'clock in the afternoon because people are exhausted, drained from the workload for the day. So maybe I should do it sometime near the morning. Maybe I should have some snacks. This is for next time. Maybe I can implement some activities to get people speaking. But there's so many options around me that I can do. And the minute I'm blaming or pointing outward, I'm missing all of these options to improve on it. Does that make sense? That's the control that I'm speaking about. And also what Brené Brown is referring to when she says, I'd rather have it be my fault. Because if it's my fault, there's something that you can do about it. Does that make sense? Absolutely, eh? You need to let that sink in. I can give you another scenario, and then if you want, somebody else can come up with theirs. Which scenario? This actually happened about 2-3 weeks ago. We regularly have our employees fly to Johannesburg on a conference, and it is the responsibility of our head office to ensure that the accommodation and the catering is sorted. And what we found is that for employees that have halal requirements, generally the accommodation doesn't cater to halal. Does that make sense? And I spoke to the travel coordinator for our head office to say, listen, you need to change that. It needs to be conducive for all our employees, and they need to ensure that they cater for halal, blah, 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 the whole toot. And she said, look, totally understands, but that's actually not their fault. That's the accommodation's fault. They only have control over booking, making sure that the room is available, that their baggage gets taken, so on and so forth. But I said, you are responsible for the experience of the employees. So while you don't have control over what the accommodation offers, you can inquire, you can phone them. Surely there's other clients that have other dietary requirements that they do cater to. Maybe they order in, maybe, I don't know, there's so many options that you have in front of you. But the minute you're saying it's not me and you're pointing outward, that scenario is not going to improve. It's going to stay the same. That's another example. So what I like to tell the learners is you have to ask yourselves these questions, right? The first one is Is this negatively impacting me? Whatever the scenario is, that's question number one. Is this negatively impacting me? You could say yes. In my scenario with my boarding sessions, yes, it's impacting me. And then number two, could this happen again? So is there a possibility that my session could be boarding again? I'll say yes. Then the last one is, am I comfortable with it happening again? I'm uncomfortable with it happening again. I want my sessions to be productive. And the minute, specifically for the last two that you're saying yes to, that means you need to do something now. That means that you are accountable. You've played a role to the scenario that you're in, and you have to act to change it. Does that make sense? Any questions? Everybody comfortable? Yes.
Give you a
looking on the accountability is like social constructed, and it's something you can learn from someone, because those are the questions that you self-ask, but also respond without asking, just from learning to others. That's what I see also in accountability. I don't know if I'm right.
I don't understand the second part. So you can learn by asking those questions for yourself, and then what's the second part?
You respond without asking us.
I think it's scenario dependent. I think it depends on the actual scenario. But through these questions, it helps you identify if there's something that you should do. Because sometimes the scenario gets sort of blurred, the lines get blurred. Am I responsible for this? Is Lenin responsible for this? Do I have to act? Do I hold somebody else accountable? What do I do? And through these questions, it sort of gives you some kind of framework in terms of, should I do something or not? Does that help? Yes, no? Yes.
a question.
Okay.
How do you avoid this becoming toxic? You could become kind of person who goes immediately to, what can I do? How can I fix this? How can I, when it's clearly somebody else. Okay, I'm a blamer. Somebody else should actually be taking responsibility, but you preferring to be in control here, and this can become draining and heavy for you. You need additional support. So at what point do you have to say, wait, hold on, this is too much?
Yeah. So I think with the last question, am I comfortable with it happening again? When you tap into the last one, are you comfortable with it happening again? And you saying no, you're sort of evaluating, how do I prevent it from happening again? Sometimes there's going to be a third party involved where you need to have that conversation. There is a way to have that conversation. And I think if you remember, I don't know if all of you have been in the emotional intelligence workshop the last time, but through that session, there's certain tools that you need to navigate those sort of difficult conversations. But the bottom line is, when evaluating the likelihood of it happening again, you sort of go into solution mode with how to prevent it. There's going to be a time where you need to hold somebody else accountable, where you need to interact with him. It's really difficult without having set scenarios that we can speak about. But maybe we can, yes, maybe we can tap into some scenarios.
Don't really help you yet identify whether you are actually in control of changing. If I can give an example, like I submitted an ethics application and I got back the review with 38 points to address. And my initial response was, oh, I completely did not explain well my study design and all. Like I immediately went into blame myself mode, basically. But So how do you actually identify whether things are really in your own control of?
Yeah, so if we go through, is this negatively impacting me? I'm assuming yes.
Yes.
Could this happen again?
Yes.
Okay. Are you comfortable with it happening again?
No.
No.
Oh, well, I mean, it's a lot of work. Yeah, point.
Okay, so if your answer is no, you sort of need to dissect what could you do to prevent it from happening again? What are the options that you have on the table?
You properly, it really looked like individual people have reviewed separate parts of the protocol and have just commented on intro, just commented on methods, and then someone just put everything together, and that's why I have many overlapping points, people raising the same thing. So I don't know really.
How could you fix that?
Yeah.
Is there like an error with the instruction? Is there, so I don't fully understand your world, but I'm just trying to get to how do you solve that?
I mean, I am in control of basically pressing.
Is the ethics review your responsibility, or is it something that you participated in?
Send it in and someone else reviews it.
Are you unhappy with the amount of errors that was received, or do you feel like there should have been a better instruction?
Yeah.
So my question would be, so the responses that you got, there's an interpretation that there were 3 different people reviewing different sections or multiple people. Could it be that they didn't understand the questions? Because you could respond to all the questions. That's not a problem. That's what we do for our ethic responses. But there's an identified thing that's happening here is that if it was one person reviewing it, they would have encapsulated and you may have had fewer responses required. So how do we address this? And yes, we can make the responses, but this might happen to someone else and they might not be as comfortable to go through all the trouble you've been through.
So it seems like there's an error with the process. The process could be tightened. So,
Basically understand there's actually something where if you actually are in control, yes or no, basically, because you can like say yes to that it has a negative impact that it could happen again and that you don't want it to happen again, but it doesn't always mean that it is within your like.
exactly. So in that scenario, if there's a process, these answers sort of help indicate if it is within your control or not. Sometimes you may feel that it's not going to happen again. This was a once-off scenario. And number 3, you could choose that you are actually fine with this happening again. It's nothing major. It's not a big deal. It's sort of small. But if it is something that's impacting you, through dissecting, if you're comfortable with happening it again, finding the solution and seeing if it is something that you can influence. Because in your scenario, it sounds like there's a process that needs to be tightened. Are you near the process?
I think in this particular instance, I mean, a lot of communication. I mean, it's not entirely in our control. How we do it well is really dependent on how we communicate what it is we are going to be doing. Getting things from everybody that is required, which is also very difficult. It's one of those things someone on the chat just mentioned now that we have to do. We answer it as calmly as possible and hope that it doesn't happen again. And I mean, I guess it's not the perfect situation to be in.
But I mean, if this is definitely something we need to unpack, maybe not now, but if it's something that occurs regularly and it's not a good experience, you do have some somewhere where you can influence it becoming better, because you have to go through the experience. No. Who's the owner of this thing? The university. And, and you can't give suggestions? We can? Okay. Absolutely. So this scenario is not unique to me. The scenario itself is far from something I've ever heard before, but the responses are not unique. I've been in many sessions where I can see people are deflated, but when I ask them, what have you tried thus far? I need you to reflect on all the different ways you've tried. Have you tried anything? Yeah. So I generally get that. Either I haven't tried anything because I assume what's going to happen, or I've tried once. I've tried. It's not working. Just because you tried one doesn't mean that's necessarily the right solution. Get creative. Go to the drawing board. That one didn't work. I'm going to try something else. You have a goal. You don't want this to happen again, right? So you need to ensure that you apply the correct solution. You can get crazy. You can hound the people. Get everybody to, I don't know, make a noise and make them change it. I don't know what you need to do, but you have many options. There was one time, because I do get a lot of people get frustrated and they need help, right? And there was one time when I said, you know what, guys, I'm going to help you. I just need one of you to come to me, send me an email, tell me what the issues are. I will go myself to the CEO and I'll have that meeting. Nobody came. Nobody. So you have to act. Something is, if you're in a scenario that you feel you don't want to go through it again, that is your indication that you have some accountability. You are responsible in some way for the scenario that you're in, because by you doing nothing means it's definitely going to happen again and you don't like it. Does that make sense? It sounds like I'm lecturing. I don't mean to lecture. Trying to offer some tools. Okay, cool. So I'm going to introduce you to, we are going to go through some more scenarios. I'm just a little bit mindful of time, but I'm going to take you through the Oz principle, which was named after the 4 characters in the Wizard of Oz on their journey to personal accountability. So with the Oz principle, they're referring to 2 scenarios: responding to situations either by acting above the line or below the line. Essentially, in short, above the line is when you're being accountable, below the line is when you're pointing outward. And remember, when you're pointing outward, you're missing that opportunity to solve it or to have some sort of control over it. Okay, so the below the line responses, these are things that you would typically say when you are saying it's not your fault. So you would say things like, nobody told me, it's not my job, I don't have enough time. Does that sound familiar? That's when you're pointing outward, right? So when you hear yourself saying, I don't have time for this, this is not my job, nobody told me, they didn't give me the information, that's when you're pointing outward. That's when you're playing the blame game. That's when you're losing control over the solution. You have to change it. And it's difficult. It's difficult to see that you are playing a role in the situation you're in. I think much like the question that you asked earlier, how do you know? It's difficult to see. I'm scared to play this again. Is it going to be echoey? Let's try.
Whoa, that's not good.
Oh, I don't need this. I'm already late.
Somebody will come. Anybody out there?
Do you have a phone?
No. Sorry. Somebody! Hello? There are two people stuck on an escalator and we need help. Now, would somebody please do something? I don't believe this. You gotta be kidding me.
I'm gonna cry.
Well, there's not enough left to do, is there?
So, I mean, that probably looks silly to everyone here, but that's what it looks like when you actually do have the power to do something, but you choose not to. You choose to stand still. Okay, so the above the line response is where we act. And I'm going to take you through the see it, own it, solve it, do it at the end. But in short, it's where you need to recognize the scenario. You need to see that there is a problem. And you can do that by asking the questions. That's not there anymore. But to see that there is a problem, you can ask yourself the questions. The two ones is, for me, the most important is there a possibility of this happening again? If the answer is yes, are you comfortable with it happening again? That's helping you to see that there is an issue. Because the minute you're saying yes to both, it means that you need to do something, right? Own it. You need to recognize that you played a role. You contributed to the situation that you're in somehow. You need to own that. Solve it. You need to get creative. I said this earlier that people will try one, or they might even just think in theory, it's not going to, it won't work. Or they may try one and say, I tried, it didn't work. But you need to get creative. Ask your friends for their feedback, a colleague, what are their thoughts? Get different perspectives. And then essentially just do it. And we're going to walk through that in a moment. But I do want to go through some scenarios. I don't understand your world too much. It's really different in the corporate environment. But I've come up with some 3 scenarios that I think would be good for us to just discuss. So I'm going to show the scenario. I want you to tell me who you think is accountable in that situation. And we can debate it. Some of these may be close to home. Okay, so Jordan, a graduate student, recently met with his supervisor, Dr. Lee, to discuss the first draft of his project proposal. During the meeting, Dr. Lee indicated he would provide constructive feedback within 2 weeks of receiving Jordan's draft. A month has passed with no communication between Jordan and Dr. Lee, and Jordan still needs to receive feedback to proceed with the revisions. Who is accountable? So we have one person saying both. Would you like to explain why? Do you have a...
I think on their meeting that the supervisor would provide the feedback, but was silent. So the student didn't take action. He was also silent. So cannot blame what happened to the supervisor. He doesn't know. So he should take some initiative.
So you would say both, just both, but if you have to choose between the two of who's more accountable, which one would you choose?
Do you want to go for that? More accountable.
Who's more accountable? The student.
Interesting.
He's a degree, his PhD.
Anyone else? So you're saying the student? Both? So you think both, but more the student because it's the...
Um, I'm listening to you, but I'm sorry.
Okay. Anyone else?
Anyone? Any of the students, perhaps, that want to comment?
Come, students, it's your time to shine. It looks like you have something to say. The guy with the cap.
Yeah, definitely. The student is responsible for his project, but I also think that if uh, the supervisor uh, gave him like, oh, he said, I'm gonna get back to you in 2 weeks. So he's like assuming a responsibility of giving the student a feedback within 2 weeks. If he's busy and if he's not able to, of course, he must communicate and say, oh, actually, I'm not gonna be able to get back to you on the first, let's say, timeline. So I'm gonna need more time. And of course, the student is also responsible because he didn't try to reach out the supervisor more than once, so to understand what was happening. So yeah, but since the supervisor assumed a responsibility saying that, oh, I'm gonna get back to you in 2 weeks, so I would say the supervisor, it will be accountable in this situation.
So you in conclusion, are you saying the supervisor?
If I had to choose, yes, because he said, oh, I'm gonna do this within 2 weeks. If he's not able to, like, this is he's compromising, like assuming a compromise. I don't know how to say it. But if he's not able to do it, then he should get back and say, oh, I'm gonna need more time. But also a student is, of course, responsible for his project. And
Thank you. Does anybody else want to add? Yes.
Just to share experience, the way I see it is that if the supervisor is silent for a year, are you still waiting for a year or 2 years? Because you agreed, I think that's you're still accountable for that. And for some supervisors, they have so many students. So if you wait, you're gonna wait until you remind, you search for him. Yes, you can get the feedback. That is sometimes works. Like for my personal experience, my supervisor had so many students, but I realized he receives a lot of emails and meetings. So if you print a manuscript and send to his office, actually he reads it the same day. If you wait in the hostel, you will wait. Yeah, so this is how I can see. You still have to take control of your project.
Thank you. So yeah, at the end of the day, the student, Jordan, he's most accountable here. At the end of the day, it's his project proposal. It's his. And this supervisor is helping him. Yes, we asked the supervisor to provide feedback. But like you mentioned, if you don't get the feedback, and then what? You're still accountable for that project. So what you could do, so for example, okay, no, just there's no questions there. But by asking yourselves those questions, is there a possibility that this can happen again? And am I comfortable with it happening again? Or am I not comfortable, whatever? Means you need to do something. There are things you can do to ensure it doesn't happen again. This scenario, in the environment you're in, it could happen 3 or 4 times in a year. So you have to get used to finding the solutions that work in those scenarios. In our world, it's slightly different in the corporate world, but I always say that you need to get comfortable with asking the man, following up with the manager when you need something, if it's your project, you owning that. The outcome, whatever that, the outcome of that project's on you. You want that control. What you could do, for example, if you gave the supervisor 2 weeks, you plug in 3 days before the time a reminder for yourself to follow up, just making sure that we're still on schedule for the, I don't know, you can make it friendly. but you still in control. People tend to think that if you submit something to somebody else where they need to do their little piece and it comes back to you, they think that you can release ownership over it. You don't. It's still yours. You need to get that other person to perform. So in this scenario, you would hold the supervisor accountable to what they agreed to, but you're still in control of what's happening. Are we happy? Awesome. Supervisors over here, you're not happy. Do you want to add something? Oh, okay, great. Next scenario. Maria, a research assistant and PhD student, is part of a lab team that meets every Monday and Wednesday to discuss an ongoing project. The lab supervisor emphasizes the importance of these meetings for team coordination. Recently, Maria has missed several meetings without prior notice, leaving her tasks incomplete and causing delays in the lab's projects. Dr. Johnson is concerned about Maria's lack of communication and its impact on the team's productivity. I see we only mentioned Dr. Johnson's name at the end. But anywho, who is more accountable? This is a toughie. Would you like to try?
I think they're all accountable. Maria, she needs to take responsibility for herself. I mean, she's part of this project. She has ownership in it. The other teammates on the project, I mean, they each own that project. And if one person is not performing, something needs to be done about that person. A gentle, please do carry your weight. Who's this Dr. Johnson person? Dr. Johnson, the supervisor, must have some part in this as well. They also are responsible. But if the question is who's the most accountable?
You don't want to say it.
It's a Dr. Johnson's project. They own the thing. Who owns this thing? Ultimately. And then it's the supervisor. The supervisor.
Anyone else want to weigh in on this? Yes. Could you pass the mic, please?
Says it's the supervisor.
I also think the supervisor needs to check in as to why Maria is missing all these meetings. There could be something wrong. She could be struggling. So just a little bit of check-in.
Thank you. Does anybody think something else? Someone else? Maria? We all think it's the supervisor. Is that a yes? Okay. Most accountable, sorry. Most accountable. Essentially, they're all accountable in the setting, but who's most? Are you guys safe to say the supervisor? You don't seem safe. These are not the answer. Sorry? Sorry? Dr. Johnson. Yeah. Yeah, at the end of the day, it is the supervisor in the setting that's most accountable. You can sort of see it as a coach or someone leading a team. If one team member is lacking, not playing their part, as the leader of the team, you need to have the conversation, you need to implement activities, you need to hold that person accountable. At the end of the day, they need to contribute. That's the role of the leader within that project team. If, for example, the supervisor was not the leader of the project team and it was the students, the project team itself, then it would be the students. But in this scenario as well, the student would need to be held accountable for the actions for change to happen. Yep.
There's a comment online regarding the feedback. They say, on the feedback for proposals, PhDs, grants, fellowships, etc., it's always the person that is writing that is mainly accountable. If there's a deadline in 1 month, for example, and he needs to send to the supervisor for review, who promises in 2 weeks' time. The person writing the proposal should continue for the 2 weeks to improve the proposal, so by the deadline, with or without comments or review from the supervisor, a good proposal can be produced for the deadline.
That is thorough feedback. Somebody who definitely knows the process. Okay, thanks for the comment, the additional feedback. Are we comfortable with the scenario? There's one more. Okay, the last one. Emma is working on a crucial research project for her master's thesis. The project involves complex data analysis and advanced methodologies. She has been encountering significant challenges with the data analysis and feels that she has not received sufficient support from her supervisor to successfully submit the research project. This support will have a big impact on her final submission. Who is accountable? Do we understand that scenario? I don't even know if the scenario fits in your world. Okay, it does. Okay. Tricky. It's not tricky for you. You have an answer. Yes, let's try.
I'll answer in two forms. In some situations, we'll go all the way to have their research. They go all out there to get them maybe a lab or other collaborators. And in some situations, you don't have such support. So in those situations, the student needs to take responsibility for that and push. Sometimes you don't even have to let your supervisor know until you've been able to connect or collaborate. Then you let them know, and from there they even applaud you. So that's the way I answer it. So in a context, if it's a situation that is consistent in the lab or in that research group, then the students must learn that environment and work around it. And in the other situations too, oftentimes we supervisors need to take responsibility for the things that we have accepted to do.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I see. Were you going to say something over there? Or did you just stretch? Yeah. Anyone else?
Was that answer? That was both. And the answer to the question, who is more, is that who is more accountable here? The student.
The student.
The student, because the student, it's the student's project.
Can we raise our hands for the students?
More.
More accountable. Okay. Yeah.
It seems to be consensus online as well, both, but there's one student part.
Yep. At the end of the day, like with the first scenario, this is your degree, your qualification, your journey, your learning. If something's lacking for you to reach your objectives, you need to ask for it. You need to say something. You need to do something. You need to request it. By sitting back and waiting for additional support that your supervisor or lecturer may not even know you need, nothing's going to happen. Does that make sense? I like to say that this is how you flex that muscle. You need to train muscles to do certain things. And for the most part, people feel uncomfortable with asking when you need something or when you need help. That scenario is going to repeat itself in your life a number of times. You need to start flexing that. You need to use that muscle so that it starts getting easier. You need to focus on the end game. What's your objective? Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, basically. So do you have some tips for students how to reach out? Because I think in many cases, yeah, but we have, for example, a team that doesn't work even in the same place. So it's not like you easily run into each other. You have to do a lot via email or online meetings. Like, do you have some tips for students how to like take a responsibility for your own progress and just bother your supervisor until you get your feedback that you need, basically in a friendly way?
Yeah, I mean, it's not easy to push somebody that's more senior than you. But I like to think that you need to focus on your end goal. What is the outcome that you want? And if the outcome is A, and A requires you to nudge your supervisor a bit, then that's what you need to do. You have to have courage and try, because what's the alternative is not trying. You're never going to have your answer if you don't try. But by trying, you will see if it works. And as I mentioned earlier, that specific scenario is going to come up in your life again and again and again and again. So you need to get used to the solution and brave enough, because it's going to happen. Get used to the solution. Yes, sir.
So if Emma has been trying and still isn't getting a response, is Emma still accountable?
I have to just refresh my memory. So yes, she's in this scenario, Emma will always be most accountable. Because at the end of the day, this is her research project. So she needs to get creative with a solution that works, that fits this issue. So for example, if she has tried to reach out to the supervisor's not supporting her, what's the next step?
New supervisor.
Again, I don't know how it works in your world. But in our world, we have somebody more senior than the supervisor. I don't know if it works the same here.
No.
They would
There would be, I guess, opportunities for additional external support, maybe find a mentor, access additional networks. There's online tools to help you learn certain things. I mean, it's taking a lot on yourself, but it is your degree. And like you're saying, getting creative, trying to achieve your goal might require that.
So, I mean, in this scenario that you just asked, thank you for that. Thanks for the feedback. This could even be, there's a similarity with this scenario and with the cell phone provider, right? The first and foremost issue here is I need to get ready to submit this project. I don't know what I need to do. If I'm not getting any joy from the supervisor, I have to get creative, because this is happening. Time isn't stopping just for me. So I have to find that solution. I can go back. Once I've submitted, I can always go back to hold somebody else accountable for the non-support that I receive, for example. But in this moment right now, as you mentioned, this is my education, this is my degree. I'm accountable to that. It's my submission. Cool. Happy? Some people are happy with the responses, man. Okay. So this is just to circle back to the above the line response in terms of the Oz principle. I wanted us to work through some scenarios first. But the step one is to see it. And I told you that that part is the hardest part, because we're so quick to formulate those connections with how it's not our responsibility and how it's not our fault. So we have to be honest with ourselves, consider all the facts, recognize the reality of the situation. You need to look inward. I found that some people, I think it's you, tend to look inward too much. So maybe you need to start looking outward, and then vice versa. Because some people are overly accountable and they don't hold other people accountable, if that makes sense. Okay, so that's the seeing it. That's step one. Own it. So I put a little mirror there because you need to look at yourself and acknowledge that you also contributed to the situation that you're in. Sometimes it's because of you doing nothing that contributed to the situation that you're in. And then get other perspectives and act on the feedback. So we're so much in our own brand that we only see our scenario. Chat to your colleague, your peers, find out what their perspective is. It can give you a different lens into the problem or the scenario. Solve it. Ask yourself, what else can I do to get the results I want? That's the creativity. We generally try one scenario and we give up. But there's so many options, so many solutions that you can try. And you have to try. I feel like you're not allowed to complain about something if you haven't tried to solve it. Because it's like, then what did you do? I'm just saying. Recognize that some things are out of my control. Some things you just can't solve. I remember through accountability, I sort of had to, somebody was really mean to me and I didn't like how the person had treated our employees. And the bottom line in that situation was we were never going to interact with this person again. Never. So it didn't make sense for me to waste my time and energy calling this person in. We're just like, yeah. So that scenario was sort of out of my control. Didn't make sense to further engage with that. And then finally, do it, take action, implement your solution and follow up relentlessly. Measure your progress. Of course, the first solution may not try. You tried something, it didn't work, get more creative, drawing board, and then try it again. Any questions? Are you absorbing? Because you have a question mark.
It's my angry pitch face. I'm sorry. I'm still thinking about the last scenario, and Emma is going out of her way. In my mind, she is actually trying to get things done. She can try to get things done by herself, but still also hold her supervisor accountable. I mean,
Yes.
it might take some time to get a result over there, but she'd still, meet her goal. There are other avenues. So, I mean, it's not a defeatist. I can't do anything now because my supervisor's not on board.
Absolutely.
It's I am an active player in this. I'm seeing it. I'm doing it. I'm trying to solve this thing. Okay, yeah, I got it now. Thank you.
Thanks for adding to that. No, it's great. Sometimes you just say it for it to, sink in. Any other comments or questions? Yes.
I'll just circle back to ethics situation. So back in my former institution, you mentioned something that we might need to come together and take an action, especially if such scenarios have been happening in several times or departments. So I remember my promoter then, very amiable person, but in this situation, because it was impacting a lot of students in the department, he had to go with a couple of colleagues to the ethics office and raise a lot of noise, So everybody knows him. He's quite popular guy, I think. So they didn't know him to be a troublemaker. So it was quite. So they had to bring in the campus security to, to melt down the situation, and it got to the dean and all that. So, and they had their evidences. PhD students were having 2 years waiting for ethics report, and like you said, a couple of the reviewers will look at the same thing, and there will be no one collating the responses to make it into one review, and the students had to keep doing that. So they had to make a lot of noise, but they had evidences that they were piling up. And after that, they took them to like disciplinary committee and all that, and it solved a lot of. So maybe
So it's possible.
Do something.
So I firmly believe that there's always a solution It's just a matter of you getting creative and not stopping. Just keep searching for the right solution and trying until you get there. You get it and it works and it fits. Would you like to add anything else? I think that's me, sorry. But from our side, that's pretty much accountability. I hope that there's something you can take away or could take away from the session. The main thing for me is that seeing accountability as having control over your scenario and your situation so that you can find the correct solution so it does not need to happen again. That's it from me. Thank you. Thank you, everyone, and thank you, everyone online.
Thank you so much, Ruin. Thank you very much for joining us today. Lots of claps and applauses from the people online and within the room. This session is invaluable. We're getting top class information from somebody who does this for a living, a learning and development
Learning and development manager.
Yes, sorry. So thank you so much for taking your time and all the effort that you put into us in the room and online and through social media as well, because this is recorded and will be shared with everybody. Thank you very much for being here. I hope everything was absorbed. If you have any further questions, you're welcome to contact me or Luan, and I can pass on the message. Thank you. Thank you for joining us. For the people who are in the room, we have some refreshments outside for you. My apologies to the people on virtual online. I wish I could feed you, but I can't. Maybe next time, if you're in the vicinity and Luan joins us again for her next session, which I think might be adopting a growth mindset. So in the next quarter, because we have Luan presenting with us once a quarter, she will cover the importance of adopting a growth mindset. So especially for students, we receive feedback from our supervisors on our projects. Who got Emma's upset now, getting these red marks on her proposal and seeing it as, oh, they hate me, I'm never going to have a life in science, rather than hey, this is an opportunity for me to grow myself as a scientist. Thank you for this feedback. It's so constructive. I'm going to change the world. So that's adopting a growth mindset, right? So that's what Luan will be speaking about in our next session in the next quarter. If you are in the vicinity, please do come and join the community on site. That would be wonderful. We do feed you if you register. Otherwise, thank you very much for joining us today, and we'll see you next quarter with Luan Moodley.